Roberto De Zerbi. An interesting guy, mainly because he's one of those coaches that seem to, out of absolutely nowhere, blow up and become the hot topic, the new sexy guy on the block that everybody wanted to sign as their head coach. The previous examples are Xabi Alonso, which is completely deserved, Eric Ten Hag, which definitely looked deserved at the time and may still come good. I don't necessarily think he's a bad coach. But these types of guys that burst onto the scene and all of a sudden everybody wants to make them a part of their team. Also me, obviously. My performances on Football Manager have been attracting attention from some of the largest clubs in the world. I think everybody knows that. I've gotten calls from Bayern Munich, but, Uli Hoeneß and I, we didn't really see eye to eye in the first place. Probably because he still thinks Vincent Kompany is a center back instead of a head coach. But that's neither here nor there, nor really anywhere. How is that guy still in charge of Bayern Munich? Hasn't he been there for like 40 years? Isn't it time for a changing of the guard? I guess not when you won 11 consecutive Bundesligas, but I still can't tell if the Vincent Kompany thing is a joke, honestly, but I'm going to leave that there because obviously I'm not in the running for the Bayern Munich job. But one of the names that was bandied about for Bayern Munich, for Liverpool, and everywhere else, Roberto De Zerbi, it's gone a completely different direction. If you haven't heard, his contract with Brighton has been terminated by mutual consent, which is an awkward phrase, right? Because is anything ever really mutual consent? Like when you're describing a breakup where you got dumped viciously, right? You'll describe that breakup as, well, we just didn't see it for each other and we both thought it was a good idea for us to move on. So anytime I hear the phrase mutual consent, that's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of somebody trying to mitigate the damage from a crushing breakup by explaining it to their friends as, they really just, everybody just kind of agreed that this was a good idea. The problem with this Roberto De Zerbi thing is that he is really turning the PR all the way up. Right? Because I don't know whether the person that actually did the breaking up was Brighton or whether the person that actually did the breaking up was De Zerbi. Now, De Zerbi would tell you that it was him that decided to do the breaking up. He grabbed the mic while at the, what's it called? It's the Bank of America Stadium, the something stadium, right, on the South Coast where Brighton plays. He grabbed the mic and talked about how he just didn't feel like he had the support of the club. I don't know how he ended up with the mic in the first place, but he was standing on the field talking about it in that way. And then the fans start to chant, stay or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, right? But they started to chant, they serenaded Roberto De Zerbi, inviting him to stay because, of course, he did get Brighton into Europe for the first time. He got them all the way up to 6th last season. But this year's been different. Roberto De Zerbi, really, it feels like from the moment he was linked with these big jobs, the moment he became the next darling of the managerial world, he has sucked. He has sucked it up. He has stunk it up enthusiastically. He stunk it up with pride. I mean, look at this. The man has won one of his last 10 matches in the Premier League. One! Granted, it was Aston Villa. Okay, it was a good win. Now, he won it against Aston Villa, but in his last, I think it's 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pretty good at eyeballing that sort of stuff. He's lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 10 Premier League matches. I thought this guy was supposed to be the chosen one, right? He's got to turn into Eric Ten Hag here, wheeling out a new excuse every week. The fact that the whole team's hurt or something. They can't find Terrell Malacia because they lost him at the International Mall in Minneapolis. Like, I don't know. Right, but you come up with some sort of excuse. His excuse when he grabbed that mic was, I just don't really have the support of the club. Now that sounds to me, right, with no evidence, but based off of his performance and the expectation that Brighton seems to have for itself all of a sudden, sounds to me a bit like he's covering his tracks. It sounds to me a bit that for the first, for the first time, at least in a long time, Roberto De Zerbi has ended up in a situation where he is not the darling, where his team is actually losing and he can't quite fix it. And when you end up in that spot, I think that actually leaving isn't necessarily the worst thing for you. One, because Brighton knows that they're a machine. Brighton knows they're a machine, and if they bring in another manager, they're going to be able to continue to have success. Their scouting and player development and player trust alone is impressive enough for them to continue to have success. I'm not worried about Brighton in this situation. Okay, Brighton seems like one of the most stable, excellent examples of a well-run club. Even though they barely finished in the bottom half this season, they also were managing Europe for the first time. And clearly there was at least a bit of discord going on between them and their manager. Maybe Roberto De Zerbi got distracted. Maybe he didn't handle the fact that he was getting attention from these other clubs well. We don't know. And I don't think Roberto De Zerbi, the way he's trying to PR spin this story, is ever going to like let us in on that secret. Like, he's never going to let us know what actually happened, because Roberto De Zerbi has come out and said a lot of funny stuff. Let me see if I can find a part of this. Fabrizio Romano's out here tweeting De Zerbi on what's next for him. I don't know. For sure, I have to stay at home for 3, 4, or 5 months. For me, it should be no problem. And then he just blows smoke up his own ass here. This because I will work studying different games, teams, and coaches. You have to build knowledge to stay on top. Look, now he very well might be saying the truth here, right? I'm not a world-class coach. Maybe every world-class coach is like, oh, I can't wait for this time off so that I can study different matches, right? And he is also somebody that is about to end up out of a job, and that might not have been much of his choice. So I'm not going to hate on the hustle here of trying to make yourself presentable to other clubs, saying like, I'm a grinder, right? I am the genius everybody thought I am. I'm going to stay locked in. I'm going to stay dialed in. I'm going to keep it at 100 so that I know exactly what's going on. But I think that it always feels weird when you get this kind of this feels Ten Hag-esque to me. And the issue with it feeling Ten Hag-esque to me, because I do think Ten Hag is a good coach, is that it's not genuine. It doesn't feel genuine. I am a fan of managers that feel genuine, right? Because as maniacal as Pep Guardiola is, he's also genuine. I think, and that really helps him connect with players in a way that people like Ten Hag have struggled to connect with players with. Because Ten Hag's a maniac, yeah. He's probably like borderline on the spectrum in terms of how obsessed he is with tactics. But he is super genuine about it. And he'll very legitimately say like, yeah, man, I'm getting a little tired. Might need to leave after next year. He'll give you his thoughts. And he'll not just give you his thoughts. He'll give his players his thoughts. You know, he's very, very genuine. And I appreciate that genuine nature. And I think in a world that is becoming less and less genuine, I had this told to me, actually, I'm not even making this up. I had this told to me by an actual real life manager. And I always thought it stuck with me. A guy named Rob Dre, who was the coach of Taunton Town. And he led Taunton Town to promotion, right? So this is a guy that was accomplishing a lot at the time that we were talking about this. We filmed a whole YouTube video where he quizzed me, right? It was kind of fun. It was real manager versus football manager pro or whatever. Me being the football manager pro, as loosely as that can be defined. And he quizzed me on a bunch of tactical situations, but he was talking about, well, what is the one thing that's most important as a manager? And even him in the 6th division of England talking about, look, players hear a lot of things from a lot of different people. The best thing you can do as a manager is tell them exactly what you're thinking, exactly where they stand, exactly what's going on. Being able to communicate that in an efficient way and understand how it's probably going to affect where they're at mentally. De Zerbi is always, I don't know if it's just a me thing. I'm sure if I sat down and had a beer with him, he'd probably be a pretty normal guy. Although he has had a very interesting career. He was, of course, managing Shakhtar Donetsk, which is an interesting time to be managing in Eastern Ukraine, right? Like, he was managing Shakhtar Donetsk for a while. That's how he kind of got on Brighton's radar in the first place. I would assume Brighton probably knew who De Zerbi was when he was 5 years old, considering how good Brighton is at scouting. But I've just always gotten a bit of an unreal feel to him, almost like he's AI. The same way that like Ten Hag feels like a poor AI recreation of like it's Sir Alex Ferguson, the way he tried to handle the Jadon Sancho situation and whatever. It just feels like there is a very serious public front to the way De Zerbi carries himself. I was one of the people drinking the Kool-Aid. I thought that Roberto De Zerbi was one of these chosen guys, and I'm a big believer that not succeeding at one club does not mean a manager is bad. Same with a player. Not succeeding at one club does not mean a player is bad either. You never know the situation. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. But it definitely is not a great-looking ending to Roberto De Zerbi's time at Brighton. And there are rumors all over the place that, even I don't know, Bayern Munich's going to be the team that swoops in for him at the last second, or that there's some sort of deal already in place. Everything from like Nottingham Forest are considering Roberto De Zerbi. Like, he's going to land on his feet. The guy guided Brighton to a 6th place finish in the Premier League and had them flying high for a long time. A lot of the Brighton successes that you remember happened under De Zerbi. He did even better than Potter. Right? He just was in the wrong place in the wrong time, or else Chelsea would have paid him $80 million to suck. Right? And De Zerbi probably would have done better than Potter, I would imagine, because at least he looks a little bit like Pochettino, who's doing a pretty good job over there. But it's gone from surefire, definitely great manager to things are interesting. And there are a couple of directions De Zerbi can go from here, because while this job was great at one point, It is now not great. And when you're leaving by mutual consent, that's all going to come down to the PR in terms of how that's perceived. And if he goes to another job, particularly another job in the Prem, like a Nottingham Forest, and doesn't do well, the Roberto De Zerbi flame has now started to seriously extinguish. Because there is another thing that you have to throw off. If you succeed at Brighton, we just watched Graham Potter succeed at Brighton and then suck at Chelsea massively, which means Brighton was kind of the reason for that success a little bit more than Potter. At least, that's the way that it's perceived. So if De Zerbi has all the success at Brighton, then goes somewhere else and sucks eggs, well, now there's going to be this real perception that if Brighton doesn't want somebody, there's a very good reason for that, right? That if you're leaving Brighton, you're somehow damaged goods. Brighton made you what you are, not you. Brighton made you accomplished. Brighton is what allowed you to succeed as a manager. So I'm very curious, and it's one of those situations, I'm not going to try and predict it. I have no idea. 3 years from now, Roberto De Zerbi could be out of a job or the head coach of Bayern Munich, and I would be equally surprised by both. And that is a pretty wild spot to be in as a manager. Seriously. Who else is in that spot? Bye.